So again, welcome everyone to today's Midnight Training Session series. Today we'll be going over our POs or purchase orders and proofing systems. As always, we'll take a look at our administration menu to look at a few general settings and options that will cover some of the drop downs that we see across the various areas of the modules that we'll be looking at today. To start, I'll take a look in our global settings list. In here, there's only a couple of options that we'll be looking at in detail. In particular, under our PO submenu, there is a checkbox in here with the instructions to utilize the PO review process. A new PO will be considered a request, and once it's approved, it can be converted to a PO. When this box is checked, this means that any new purchase order in which you or another user creates in Midnight will be defaulted to a request status, and someone marked with an administrative role will have to convert the PO from a request into an actual PO before it can be identified as such and pulled up via searches or reports with that information. Additionally, we'll take a look at a couple of things within our different formatting options lists within the proofs themselves. Accessing the proofs is a little bit different than accessing the other areas of our system. In order to get to your proofs, you'll need to click the Tools button. When you click Tools, you're brought into a menu which has both options for proofs and our postage module, if you were unaware of this. Consequently, our POs and vendors are all controlled under the purchasing module. In order to create a PO, you first need to have a vendor listed in your system. The POs vendors can be created in this screen by clicking the New Vendor button, or they can be modified by clicking and entering one of the POs that already, one of the vendors that already exists here. In this screen, we can also do a couple of things that we'd normally be able to do in our other areas of Midnight, such as add a couple of options for our filtering choices. And we can run a filter reset or column sort as we need by clicking the columns themselves, or by clicking the clear button to omit the data in which you see here. Finally, clicking the reset filters resets your search results and filter sort back to what it would be once you enter the screen in the first place. When creating a new vendor, you're given a couple of different options which are expected as far as getting your general vendor information built into the system. You can start by giving your vendor a vendor name. You can also establish a general contact. That would be the person in reference for this vendor. A general address, which would fill out any of the basic documentation for a PO that's associated to that vendor. A country to identify where in which your vendor is located, and the company to associate your vendor to for the purposes of report generation. When you assign a company to a vendor, this company is loaded into any purchase orders created for the vendor, and this helps load, one, the licensee information for your specific company, and two, the report logo into the upper left portion of the purchase order report, which is prepared for distribution to your vendor. Additionally, you can assign a standard terms and conditions choice, which is definable within your admin menu. This list is the same that matches within your estimates, orders, and customers, and can be controlled within the admin menu under the estimate/orders submenu. And finally, the active checkbox, of course, dictates whether or not the vendor is active and selectable on any of your purchase orders. The other areas in here have various elements of functionality, such as the URL being simply a data reference for this particular vendor's website, a vendor code, which assists in documentation generation, and a phone number and email for additional info as well. The notes section here at the bottom is just that, a simple editable comments field or notes field in which you can fill out additional details for your specific vendor. There's much more logic associated with the contacts list within a specific vendor. In here, you can create a contact or several different contacts for your vendor. These contacts can be selected on your purchase orders and used as methods for communication. Upon filling out some simple elements in here, such as the contact type and contact information for their phone numbers and email addresses, you can use this system to help generate reports to be distributed out of Midnight with a bit more efficiency. Do bear in mind that any contacts that you have for a vendor can be deactivated by either clicking into their record and unchecking their active checkbox, or by clicking the inactivate button within the vendor's contact line itself. Finally, under the frequently purchased items, you can select inventory records that are marked as PO items to assign to the specific vendor, in which you can have a price designated for that item. As well as update the vendor's code and name description for that particular item. In here, under the unit price column, in order to expedite the production of POs, we suggest setting up the unit pricing for your individual item at the per piece level. Even if you order goods by the 1,000 or per 1,000 cost, we do suggest updating the unit cost to reflect the per piece cost. Now we do have the ability to control the list of items that appear under this list. In order to modify these choices, we can enter our warehouse module. And within one of our items, we can see that the checkbox for PO item has been checked. If this item checkbox is checked, then it will appear under the list of available purchasable items within a specific vendor. And if it's something that your vendors no longer carry, by unchecking this, you clear that option from that specific vendor's frequently purchased items list drop down to make it so it cannot be selected in the future. On your PO screen, you have the ability to create a new PO by selecting the New PO button here in the upper right. Additionally, you have the ability to search for your purchase orders in a variety of ways, as with most of our other screens in Midnight search lists, by doing a choice for whatever it is specifically that you're looking for, or filling in some additional data, as well as clicking the column header name for whatever column it is that you'd like to apply a sort by to get your information to sort as you would expect it to. To enter a PO, you can either click the purchase order number or the PO name here. Additionally, you can expand your recently visited purchase orders. These will show the 10 most recently accessed POs for the specific user that is logged in to Midnight. Meaning that if you were to access Midnight from a different PC under your same username, this list would be the same for your account. And finally, to change up how you search and sort for your PO info, you can click the extended search here and fill out details to look for more information or sort options within your POs, such as a definable list of your user-defined fields, should you have any created for your POs, as well as the option to filter back in closed POs, which are normally omitted. By clicking Submit after applying your search options within the extended search, you'll see new options or new choices under your PO list become available for search and access. Now we're to create a new purchase order. Because of our global settings choice to show our POs as a request specifically, we see that the request has already been selected for us. Our next step would be to select the vendor, which carries forward in all the general information for the specific vendor. The contact is available based on the contact typed in the upper portion of the vendor, as well as under the available contacts list within the vendor's contacts tab. As you fill out and select your different contacts, your billing and shipping info may change to reflect who it is that you select. So be sure to make sure that your information is filled out with detail as accurately as possible. From here, the other key steps involve selecting the items in which the purchase order is associated with and selecting the order or orders in which the associated items on the PO are tied to. This can be done in a couple of ways. You can either start by adding in your items that are available from your frequently purchased item list with the inclusion of a quantity, a markup if you have a markup associated with it, and then additional info as whether or not the material has been received yet by clicking and filling in the details and hitting Save to commit the item to your purchase order. Alternatively, you can just type in details for an item and then fill in your own quantity and price as well as markup. And to tie them to a job, you can either update the order number in the header by clicking the Select Order and tying these items to one of your specific jobs, or by adjusting your line items, clicking the order number and associating your goods to a variety of orders. There may be cases in which some of your POs will contain goods that are meant to be distributed across several different jobs. For instance, if you order a large case of envelopes and they're to be used across 2 or 3 different jobs that require the same type of envelope. Alternatively, you may just decide to keep your order number here in the header and have all of your items automatically swap in this order number in lieu of having to place that order number specifically for each item. Either way, the association to the order allows you to quickly associate that to an order for job costing purposes. As you can see, the extended price before markup applied to a job as an expense or PO expense more effectively track your actual profitability. You'll see that the sum of your extended prices and your prices with total markup are listed down here below. The convenience of having the markup does allow you to track what the expected sales will come from as far as the goods in which you order. These can be associated with a job in a couple of different ways. We'll be touching on that in just a moment. First, in this case, now that we've got our PO created, we'll create our actual document that references our items order as a PO. I'll first mark my PO as a purchase order, and then under my reports list, I would open up my purchase order report to take a look at the PO itself. This will show details first for our organization based on our global settings company that's associated with the vendor, and then by the vendor information, all detailed out from options within the vendor. Additionally, we'll see details on the items in which we're ordering, the unit price and extended price as what would be quoted to us by the vendor. And of course, the other general information such as the shipping location, PO number, entry date, and other info, associated order number, etc. From here, there's a few steps of operations in which we can perform. Now that we have an order number associated with the inventory in question, we can push these items to a job by going under the quick links list and clicking the Add Items to Order button. What this does is it generates one row per PO item that you have already created. It allows you to select that item that you'd like to push to a job, identify a service that you may wish to assign it to for the purposes of sales and revenue tracking, and it lets you modify if necessary or keep the records in terms of the item's unit price with markup to give an extended price for the full quantity of the order, which will ultimately reverse calculate a sales unit price from the extended price here. We'll push these through by clicking the Save and Close button. Oops. And then when we save and close out, we can look at the order in which we've pushed our items to, or orders in some cases. And we'll be able to see that under the service type in which we've associated the service to, the marked up extended price has been added with a reverse calculated unit price for the item in question. Now this has not yet assigned the item to the job. It has simply assigned the PO item as a saleable item or line item to the job. One last thing to check while we're in here. The order's job detail analysis report will now begin to reflect data on this. You can see this information listed under the purchase orders expense, letting us know the cost as tied from the PO itself, and making sure that the service revenue has been updated to include the cost of our buyout item, in this case, the envelopes. Make sure that we're tracking our costs more accurately and measuring our profit equally as accurately. Finally, within the purchase orders themselves, you can view and access more than one or view your information in greater detail by clicking under the reports of a PO, your PO list, allowing you to see multiple purchase orders based on vendor and period of time. You can also view our PO by vendor report. It's pretty much the same report, but just handles grouping in a little bit different manner. And finally, the PO by order report, which is, again, pretty much the same kind of report. That simply displays information a little bit differently. One more time. One last thing on purchase orders is that the inventory associated with a PO can be received into the system by using the warehouse module's receive item choice. In here, you can pick the customer that you want to associate your inventory to. Select your PO. And any inventory that has already been saved within your system, in this case my paper but not my envelopes, will be loaded here with a quantity pulled from the purchase order. In this process, I can modify the parts per container and loose pieces in order to fully put away any of my goods that I need to. By clicking the Assign Put Away button, I can pick where exactly within my warehouse I want them to go. And finally, I can create a receipt and a skid flag for my goods as I've received them. The final step upon saving and closing will allow you to close the PO after you've marked the goods on the PO as received. In some cases, this may be helpful, as if you've received the entirety of the goods in which you've ordered, you may want to close your PO and mark it as completed. In other cases, you can modify the quantities during this receiving process in portions. In those cases, you would not want to mark your purchase order as closed because you had not yet received the entirety of your goods. In this case, by clicking yes, if you are to open up the purchase order in which you just created, you'll see that the line item has been updated to show the most recent material and date and the full quantity in which has been received, letting you confirm back within the PO that the goods on the purchase order were indeed received. Now, you may use QuickBooks to integrate purchase orders with your accounting process. In order to handle this procedure, you'll need to make sure that your vendor is listed by the same name within your QuickBooks vendors list. And you'll also need to make sure that your line items themselves have been given an account GLID and or item code depending on how your import procedure and mapping process is. This account GLID and account item code come from your accounting options within your admin menu and cannot be defaulted to the item itself, but can be selected on each item as you handle the receiving process. In order to export these out of Midnight, under the quick links of your purchase orders, under the quick links of your orders menu, you can get into your accounting export procedure. From here, the quick links again allow you to access your purchase order export, in which you can select any PO that you need to push out, fill out details to gain access to more POs in case you need to, say, access one that you've already exported, and click Save and Close to actually push that purchase order to an exportable file, in which you can see the individual line items and vendor information as needed for your particular job. This is a QuickBooks process, and if you don't use QuickBooks for your accounting procedure, then this may not be something that you can even do. Alternatively, this may not be something that you find the need to for handling within your QuickBooks procedure for PO handling. So of course, this is only as valuable as you find necessary. Now getting into proofs. You'll see a full list of proofs within your Tools Proofs module. All of your proofs listed here will show regardless of their status. However, you can modify this list by showing your closed proofs by, again, clicking the extended search button and showing your closed items. This makes it so you just default your status as closed versus the status of being empty or all, allowing you to see all of your proofs within the system. You can create proofs in a couple of ways, either by clicking the New Proof Request button here in the upper right, or while you're within an estimate or an order, selecting under the quick link for that estimate or order, the button in which allows you to add a proof request. For this process, we'll just look at adding a new proof the old-fashioned way. By adding a proof here, you'll be able to fill out information on the customer that the proof is for, select the contact that's associated with the customer, select an estimate or an order that the proof is tied to or expected to be tied to, upload a file, in which case the proof would be having the whole purpose of seeking the approval for, taking note that you can apply more than one file, and clicking the Save and Close process here to generate an email pop-out in which you can select who you'd like to send your proof to. And details for the proof itself in which you'll be approving. You'll see the proof number is listed here in the subject line, and the associated order number and associated order name are listed here within the subject line as well. By clicking Submit, an email is now sent to the client. This email giving the orders to have them either access the client portal should they be using that as their proof approval system, or to access the proof via the website that would normally be associated through the process of proof approval if the portal is not part of their system. In this case, if you're sending something without use of the portal, an email will go out instead with a direct web link. And when that web link is clicked, it will bring the user to a proof in which they can approve, reject, or apply a approval status with comments for approval details. This is what the customer sees when they click the link in which you email them. They'll be able to click the file or files assigned, so that way they can download and view and approve them at their leisure. And they can either select and approve or approve or reject with comments provided in the comments here as necessary. Additionally, they can supply a file back to you. For instance, if they provided you with the wrong address list or image and they need to get you a different PDF, they can attach it here and then click the Save and Close button to actually push it back. That's all the work that your client needs to do. And now if your CSR or sales rep jumps back into the proof, they can see details as to the email address which accessed the proof and the time in which it was either approved or sent back with a comment. Additionally, an email is sent back to the person who had distributed the proof in the first place, letting them know that the proof that they sent detailed out for had received a status update of either approved or rejected. The final detail here is that if you access a proof in which has already been created, you may want to simply resend that proof in case there was a problem emailing it to your client. In order to do that, by accessing the pre-existing proof and checking the Send Email Upon Submit button, at this point, your Save and Close operation will bring up the email pop-out. Typically, this is only done on proofs that are first created, but because of this process, you can send out proofs more than one time. And instead of having to do this for each recipient of the proof, you can list multiple email addresses in the To section by simply doing a comma separator, allowing you to email more than one client or more than one recipient at a time. You can, of course, just use the To and From to select either your employee account, or if you are, say, a department manager, one of your employees' accounts, and the customer's contact record. But because we don't have a drop-down method that allows you to select multiple email address recipients, you can use this to simply send it to one customer address quickly and then paste in the additionals as needed. An approved proof will be given the status of approved, and rejected, of course, will be given the status of rejected. And when an order or estimate that's tied to a proof is marked as completed and closed, the status of the proof will also be updated as closed. In this case, Order 1642's proof number 24 is marked as approved. If we access order number 1642, and give it a closed status or closed date to mark it as closed, now if we check out our proofs, we'll see that our proof 24 has been given the closed status here. That's pretty much everything for our POs and proofing system. I'll go ahead and shut down this session, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.